was growing up, basically every town had very similar things. There's a little league in every town, and maybe instead of every town having little league, there should be little league should be an option. But if you wanted to do something that not that many people were interested in my case, programming, in other people's case, maybe interest in some part of history or some part of art that there just may not be another person in your 10,000 person town who share that interest. I think it's good if you can form those kind of communities, and now people have can find connections and can find a group of people who share their interest. And I think that there's a question though of you can look at that as fragmentation, right? Because now we're not all doing the same things, right? We're not all, going to church and playing Little League and doing the exact same things. Or you can think about that as richness and depthness in our social lives. And I just think that that's an interesting question: is where you want the commonality across the world and the connection, and where you actually want that commonality to enable deeper richness, even if that means that people are doing different things. And I'm curious if you have a view on that and where that's positive versus where that creates a lack of social cohesion.
Yeah, I think almost nobody would argue with the benefits of richer social environment in which people have more options to connect around all kinds of things. The key question is, how do you still create enough social cohesion on a level of a country, and increasingly also on the level of the entire globe, in order to tackle our main problems? I mean, we need global cooperation like never before because we are facing unprecedented global problems. We just had Earth Day, and it should be obvious to everybody, we cannot deal with the problems of the environment, of climate change, except through global cooperation. Similarly, if you think about the potential disruption caused by new technologies like artificial intelligence, we need to find a mechanism for global cooperation around issues like how to prevent an AI arms race, how to prevent different countries racing to build autonomous weapon systems and killer robots, and weaponizing the internet and weaponizing social networks. Unless we have global cooperation, we can't stop that, because every country will say, well, we don't want to produce killer robots, it's a bad idea, but we can't allow our rivals to do it before us, so we must do it first. And then you have a race to the bottom. Similarly, if you think about the potential disruptions to the job market and the economy caused by AI and automation, so it's quite obvious that there will be jobs in the future, but will they be evenly distributed between different parts of the world? One of the potential results of the AI revolution could be the concentration of immense wealth in some parts of the world, and the complete bankruptcy of other parts. There will be lots of new jobs for software engineers in California, but there will be maybe no jobs for textile workers and truck drivers in Honduras and Mexico. So what will they do? If we don't find a solution on the global level, like creating a global safety net to protect humans against the shocks of AI and enabling them to use the opportunities of AI, then we will create the most unequal economic situation that ever existed. It will be much worse even than what happened in the Industrial Revolution, when some countries industrialized, most countries didn't, and the few industrial powers went on to conquer and dominate and exploit all the others. So how do we create enough global cooperation so that the enormous benefits of AI and automation don't go only, say, to California and Eastern China, while the rest of the world is being left far behind?
Yeah, I think that's important. So I would unpack that into two sets of issues. One around AI and the future economic and geopolitical issues around that, and let's put that aside for a second, because I actually think we should spend 15 minutes on that. I mean, that's a big set of things. But then the other question is around how do you create the global cooperation that's necessary to take advantage of the big opportunities that are ahead and to address the big challenges, right? I don't think it's just fighting crises like climate change. I think that there are massive opportunities around global.
Definitely, yeah.
Spreading prosperity, spreading more human rights and freedom. Those are things that come with trade and connection as well. So I think that you want that for the upside. But I guess my diagnosis at this point, and I'm curious to hear your view on this, is I actually think we've spent a lot of the last 20 years with the internet, maybe even longer, working on global trade, global information flow, making it so that people can connect. I actually think the bigger challenge at this point is making it so that in addition to that global framework that we have, making it so that things work for people locally, right? Because I think that there's this dualism here where you need both, right? If you resort to just kind of local tribalism, then you miss the opportunity to work on the really important global issues. But if you have a global framework, but people feel like it's not working for them at home, or some set of people don't feel like that's not working, then they're not politically going to support the global collaboration that needs to have happen. And I think there's the social version of this, which we talked about a little bit before, where people are now able to find communities that match their interests more, but some people haven't found those communities yet, and are left behind as some of the more physical communities.
And some of these communities are quite nasty also, so we shouldn't forget that.
Yes, so I think they should be, yes. Although I would argue that people joining kind of extreme communities is largely a result of not having healthier communities and not having healthy economic progress for individuals. I think most people, when they feel good about their lives, they don't seek out extreme communities. So there's a lot of work that I think we, as an internet platform provider, need to do to lock that down even further. But I actually think creating prosperity is probably one of the better ways at a macro level to go at that. But I guess
I would maybe just stop there a little. People that feel good about themselves have done some of the most terrible things in human history. I mean, we shouldn't confuse people feeling good about themselves and about their lives with people being benevolent and kind and so forth. And also, they wouldn't say that their ideas are extreme. And we have, so many examples throughout human history, from the Roman Empire to slave trade in the modern age and colonialism, that people, that they had a very good life. They had a very good family life and social life. They were nice people. I mean, I guess, I don't know, most Nazi voters were also nice people. If you meet them for a cup of coffee and you talk about your kids, they are nice people. And they think good things about themselves, and maybe some of them can have very happy lives. And even the ideas that we look back and say, this was terrible, this was extreme, they didn't think so. Again, if you just think about colonialism.
But World War II, and that came through a period of intense economic and social disruption after the Industrial Revolution.
Let's put aside the extreme example. Let's just think about European colonialism in the 19th century. So people say in Britain, in the late 19th century, they had the best life in the world at the time. And they didn't suffer from an economic crisis or disintegration of society or anything like that. And they thought that by going all over the world and conquering and changing societies in India, in Africa, in Australia, they were bringing lots of good to the world. And I'm just saying that so that we are more careful about not confusing the good feelings people have about their life. It's not just miserable people suffering from poverty and economic crisis.
Well, I think that there's a difference between the example that you're using of a wealthy society going and colonizing or doing different things that had different negative effects. That wasn't the fringe in that society. I guess what I was more reacting to before was your point about people becoming extremist. I would argue that in those societies, that wasn't those people becoming extremists. You can have a long debate about any part of history and whether the direction that a society chose to take is positive or negative and the ramifications of that. But I think today we have a specific issue, which is that more people are seeking out solutions at the extremes. And I think a lot of that is because of a feeling of dislocation, both economic and social. Now, I think that there's a lot of ways that you go at that. And I think part of it, I mean, as someone who's running one of the internet platforms, I think we have a special responsibility to make sure that our systems aren't encouraging that. But I think broadly, the more macro solution for this is to make sure that people feel like they have that grounding and that sense of purpose and community, and that their lives are, and that they have opportunity. And I think that, statistically, what we see in sociologically is that when people have those opportunities, they don't, on balance, as much seek out those kind of groups. And I think that there's the social version of this. There's also the economic version. I mean, this is the basic story of globalization. Is on the one hand, it's been extremely positive for bringing a lot of people into the global economy, right? People in India and Southeast Asia and across Africa who wouldn't have previously had access to a lot of jobs in the global economy now do. And there's been probably the greatest, at a global level, inequality is way down, right? Because hundreds of millions of people have come out of poverty, and that's been positive. But the big issue has been that in developed countries, there have been a large number of people who are now competing with all these other people who are joining the economy, and jobs are moving to these other places. So a lot of people have lost jobs. For some of the people who haven't lost jobs, there's now more competition for those jobs for people internationally. So their wages, that's one of the factors I would. The analyses have shown that's preventing more wage growth, and there are 5 to 10% of people, according to a lot of the analyses that I've shown, who are actually in absolute terms worse off because of globalization. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that globalization for the whole world is negative. I think in general it's been on balance positive, but the story we've told about it has probably been too optimistic in that we've only talked about the positives and how it's good as this global movement to bring people out of poverty and create more opportunities. And the reality, I think, has been that it's been net very positive. But if there are 5 or 10% of people in the world who are worse off, there's 7 billion people in the world. So that's many hundreds of millions of people. The majority of whom are likely in the most developed countries in the U.S. and across Europe. That's going to create a lot of political pressure on those in those countries. So in order to have a global system that works, it feels like you need it to work at the global level, but then you also need individuals in each of the member nations in that system to feel like it's working for them too. And that recurses all the way down. So in local cities and communities, people need to feel like it's working for them, both economically and socially. So I guess at this point, the thing that I worry about, and I've rotated a lot of Facebook's energy to try to focus on this, is our mission used to be connecting the world. Now it's about helping people build communities and bringing people closer together. And a lot of that is because I actually think that the thing that we need to do to support more global connection at this point is making sure that things work for people locally. That in a lot of ways we've made it so that the internet, so that an emerging creator can. But
how do you balance working it locally for people in the American Midwest and at the same time working it better for people in Mexico or South America or Africa? I mean, part of the imbalance is that when people in Middle America are angry, everybody pays attention, because they have their finger on the button. But if people in Mexico or people in Zambia feel angry, we care far less, because they have far less power. I mean, the pain, and I'm not saying the pain is not real, the pain is definitely real, but the pain of somebody in Indiana reverberates around the world far more than the pain of somebody in Honduras or in the Philippines, simply because of the imbalances of the power in the world. And I mean, earlier, what we said about fragmentation, I know that Facebook faces a lot of criticism about kind of encouraging people, some people, to move to these extremist groups. But that's a big problem, but I don't think it's the main problem. I think also it's something that you can solve if you put enough energy into that. That is something you can solve. But this is the problem that gets most of the attention now. What I worry more, again, not just about Facebook, about the entire direction that the new internet economy and the new tech economy is going towards, is increasing inequality between different parts of the world, which is not the result of extremist ideology, but the results of a certain economic and political model.